We're learning more this morning about a deadly incident in Cuban waters involving people on board a boat registered in the United States. Multiple U.S. government agencies are now investigating.
A situation that we're monitoring. Hopefully, it's not as bad as we fear it could be, but can't say more because I just don't know more.
Cuba says its soldiers killed 4 people on board the boat, claiming the soldiers were fired on first. It says 6 others were injured and taken to hospital for treatment. Now, all this comes at a time of already heightened tensions between the U.S. and Cuba, with an American blockade starving Cuba of oil. Oil, of course, which powers its electrical grid. Linda, let's talk about who was on board this boat. It looks like they came from the U.S., but you know more.
So this is from the Cuban government saying that the people, all 10 people who were on that boat were were Cubans living in the United States. So U.S. residents, but Cuban citizens. They say they were trying to infiltrate the island, carry out some criminal activity. So we know right now, basically, this was a speedboat that was registered in Florida that entered Cuban waters yesterday and then opened fire on Cuban soldiers. Cuban soldiers retaliated against them. One soldier was wounded. There were 4 people on that boat who were killed and 6 others wounded. So now Cuba's government releasing the identities of the 6 survivors. 1 person who was killed, 3 others have not been identified, but 1 other person was also arrested, an 11th person that had confessed to being part of some alleged plot here.
I want to talk about that plot. It is the claims from the Cubans, and the Americans are doing their own investigation. But what is the argument about what these individuals were up to? Yeah,
so what they're saying is essentially that they were there to carry out some sort of terrorist activity, that they have a history of criminal and violent activity. One of the 4 dead, we are learning from his brother, who spoke to the Associated Press, gave us a little bit more information. He said his brother was a truck driver who had lived in the U.S. for more than 20 years, saying that he was, in fact, an American citizen, and said that he had this sort of obsessive and what he says, quote, diabolical quest for Cuba's freedom, telling that to the Associated Press. Now, the Interior Ministry in Cuba says they were loaded down with weapons. And earlier you spoke with John Kirk, who's a professor emeritus of Latin American Studies, and he looked into that side of things a little bit more.
The people who were killed or arrested yesterday, they came with Molotov cocktails, assault weapons, pistols, camouflage gear. So this clearly was intended as a military mission. It remains to be seen how the Trump administration reacts to it.
We have heard from the U.S. Secretary of State only a little bit on this, but Marco Rubio is someone who has called for regime change in Cuba for decades. He's taking a more moderate tone at this early point.
Yeah, he's saying essentially he's not going to rely on what he's hearing from the Cubans, that he's going to do his own investigation into this, and particularly into whether the victims were American citizens or permanent residents. Here's a little bit more from what we heard from Rubio.
We have various different elements of the U.S. government that are trying to verify elements of the story based on what's been provided to us now. The majority of the facts being publicly reported are those by the information provided by the Cubans. We will verify that independently, and as we gather more information, then we'll be prepared to respond accordingly.
So, of course, this threatens to sort of ramp up already a tense situation between the U.S. and Cuba following the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Of course, the situation with the U.S. blocking oil shipments from Venezuela, then threatening tariffs on anyone else that sends oil over to Cuba. In light of all of this, in a statement, the ministry said Cuba's government was safeguarding their sovereignty and ensuring stability in the region. We know the U.S. has said through the U.S. Attorney's Office for Southern District of Florida, Florida's Attorney General, saying that they're doing their own investigation as well. They've sent the Coast Guard to the area, so they are out there keeping tabs on things.
Yeah, and the U.S. Coast Guard is armed, so potential for more to happen there. All right, Linda, thank you very much.